Imagine the perfect city, a utopia. What does it look like? Are there skyscrapers covered in greenery, or are there all these little cottages for everyone? What time do people wake up and go to work, or maybe they don't work at all while robots take care of them? What do people wear? Long flowing gowns, suits of armor, maybe nothing at all. A free city of free nudists. There is no sadness or pain, not any that lasts for too long. Of course, you can still stub your toe at 2 in the morning or break your wife's heart, but nobody is left starving or homeless. There are no drugs, or maybe there are a lot of drugs, free and plentiful. The city probably still gets natural disasters, but their infrastructure is so good it can quickly recover. After all, there's clean air and efficient public transport, and absolutely under no circumstances ever a shortage of avocados or kittens or techno-punk music or whatever else you like. No war or famine or disease or suffering can touch this utopia. Is there religion? Possibly, if you imagine it. But if all of this is feeling a little too goody-good for you, then you know what? Go on. Add an orgy in there as well if it helps. Whatever the city looks like, it doesn't really matter. If you imagine it, it has it. Floating skyscrapers or particle accelerators or bioengineered dragons for pets. But you know what else there is in a city like this? Skillshare. Because every utopia would of course have a massive online creative community where you can learn any skill you want. Like this dude. He's using Don Mapasi's course on animation, or this woman's using Marcus Brownlee's YouTube production course. And if Skillshare is part of a city like this, it's pretty damn cool that they're also sponsoring this video. And even better, the first 500 people to click the link in the description below, and only the first 500 get to join this utopia and learn whatever the hell they want to do. So, do it. Click it. Now you might assume the people in this city are mindless automatons who know nothing of suffering or trying or individuality or effort, but no, the people of this city have a complex internal experience, joy and love and passion and freedom and pride and choice for all that they have built together. They are informed and aware of the issues of the world, painstakingly so, they assure you. This is the shining city on the hill, or cresting the river, or the mountain summit, or behind the waterfall, whatever it is, this is the city of Omelas. Do you believe this city can exist? No? Well, come in close. How about I tell you a secret? Because inside this city, down a strange alley, inside a house you wouldn't look at twice, beneath a locked hatch in the floorboards, there is a hole. The hole is nothing special. A bed of dark, dry dirt, stone walls cold enough to suck any heat out of the room, and inside that hole is a child. How old do you imagine this child is? 6? 10? A mere infant? Whatever age, they're probably older than you assume. Their bones will be quite literally smaller from a lack of nutrition. Their skin is stretched and pale and sallow from never seeing the sun. Does it remember the touch of its mother's hand? Maybe. If it's easier for you, then no, it doesn't. They do not have a name, or perhaps they did before they were thrown down the hole. Their only friend is a rat who occasionally sneaks through the cracks in the corner to gnaw at their finger. The rat is, like everything done to the child here, painful but not enough to kill them. And every few days, someone will come to that hole and they will open up the hatch and they will throw down a bowl of gruel, some nameless something that they're supposed to eat. Nothing anyone in Omelas would ever have to eat. God no, it's just enough to keep them alive. Do they call out for their mother when that hatch opens? Please, I'll be good, I promise. If it's easier for you, then no, they don't. Maybe they say nothing because nobody ever speaks to them, or they were too young to know what words were when they were thrown down that hole. The whole world for that child is this dark, damp hole beneath a strange house in Omelas. It's only a few feet wide and not even tall enough for them to stand in anymore. I can already hear you, don't worry, what monster would do this? And in a utopia like Omelas, how could anyone allow this to happen? Well, at the age of 10 or 12 or 16 or 21 or whatever age you think someone comes of age and responsibility in Omelas, citizens of this utopia are taken down that strange alley to this house that nobody would look at twice, to that hole in the floor, and they are told the truth. Our great city, our perfect trains and roads, our good food and clean air, the health of our children and kindness of our people, all our prosperity depends wholly on the utter, abominable misery of this nameless, load-bearing child down there. Its mere existence in that hole allows us to thrive, for all of this to exist. Don't you understand? They say. And they go, why? Why would that work? And they say, we don't understand, but it is the way of things. Even if the child was freed, it wouldn't really do that much with its freedom anyway, would it? And what is the suffering of one child against the inevitable suffering of thousands of Omelan children who would die and be in pain if the child was removed from the whole? This is the contract, they say, struck with the universe or a god or a devil, whatever came to mind for you first, in exchange for this utopia. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is a 1973 story by Ursula K. Le Guin, and like much of her fiction, it is half philosophical thought experiment and half narrative. Le Guin's stories have always explored difficult questions, and Omelas is no different, because at the end of The Ones Who Walk Away, we learn something else about Omelas. We learn that after the children come of age and learn about the child down in that dirty hole down that little alley, most of them go on with their lives, believing that, well, it's bad, but the nobility and kindness and gentleness and music and joy and compassion and earnestness and hard work is only possible because of that load-bearing, suffering child. It's the lesser of two evils. Except we also learn that sometimes a select few who learn of the child in the hole walk away. Unable to accept the truth their society is built on, they walk right out the front golden gates and off into, well, we don't know. Le Guin only says it is, quote, a place even less imaginable to most of us than a city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. I want to ask you a question. What do you think The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is about? What do you think the central metaphor is? Is it about how even if we live in kind of free and democratic societies, our lives are kind of dependent potentially on things like child labor and slave labor, even if we don't necessarily know? Are we complicit in that? Or is it about how if society gets too bad, then the only way to build something better is to walk away and start from scratch? After all, Le Guin's writing is full of stories of people who walk away. Her 1974 novel, The Dispossessed, is about a group of anarchists leaving the world behind to found their own society and build something that they think is truly good, and the struggles to do that. Much like with Omelas, whether they succeed is up for question, while other stories involve overturning society completely with revolution. None of these stories seem convinced that this is going to work, but they are intimately concerned with how much bad in a society is tolerable and what the best way to deal with that is. Like, alternatively, what if we didn't walk away? What if we stayed and fought? Imagine for me the great city of Halat. Children wear clothes made of butterfly wings, ones which I assure you fell naturally to the ground. The city's skyscrapers are suspended in the air. It is perfect in much the same way Omelas is. A fair city, a good city, where people live to nurture and shelter and learn. And if these people, they sound naive and delusional, worry not, they're probably having orgies as well, and the Umhaletians have learned the ways to make this world a better place. They understand that Halat has a dark history full of war and strife. When a child of Halat comes of age, be it 10 or 12 or 18 or 21, whatever you might imagine, they learn that their society was built on suffering and turmoil too, that of the past. And when they find cruelty or suffering in their society, they do not walk away. These people, they fix it with every tool they have. The Ones Who Stay and Fight by N.K. Jemisin was written as a response to Le Guin's original story. Jemison's story suggests the most important decision we have to make isn't whether we stay or leave, but between leaving and fighting. Because we learn Halat can connect with other worlds and universes from time to time, worlds which are full of prejudice and cruelty and suffering, unlike Halat. And sometimes, these ideas get into the people. Ideas like, oh, some people are inherently more valuable than others, and sometimes these ideas get into Halat, into the city, and spread like a virus. And so, Jemison writes, Halat has these social workers who, if they find someone entirely corrupted by these terrible ideas, people truly beyond the pale, they will kill them to protect Halat's utopia. The violence in Jemison's Halat is intimately connected to the prosperity of this utopia, but in an entirely different way to Omelas. There is no child in a hole in Halat. while the child in the whole is connected to the good of the city in this sort of cosmic, unknowable way, Jemison sees the violence in the city as connected to intentionally cutting away the things which would try to destroy it. Jemison's objection isn't that a good society is dependent on some kind of suffering on a cosmic level, or that you can build a society completely free of suffering, but that that suffering is going to come in from defending this society against those who would seek to destroy it. That it still needs to be defended, that you must stay and fight. This idea is, in a way, in Le Guin's original story. After all, the ones who walk away go off somewhere to ostensibly build something better. They fight, right? Le Guin's politics and principles evolved across her life, and though she was full of convictions about the problems of the world you can see throughout her stories, much of her writing reflects a person at odds with themselves about how to precisely confront those problems efficiently, the best path forward. It's why her stories prompt us to think rather than dictate to us. It's why her story has prompted so many responses. And yet, probably the most disturbing response to her original story is also the simplest solution. Why don't we just kill the kid in the Omelas hole? Imagine activists break into the Omelas hole and kill the child on public television in hopes the alarm might put a stop to this terrible system. And they do this over and over and over, and every time Omelas ups the security, they put up more soundproofing, they arm more guards, they keep putting kids in that hole. In the story, people argue over whether a pulsating mass of child flesh would work in the hole, and what the child symbolizes, and how their child's suffering has meaning, unlike all the other cities where children suffer for no reason. So it's fine, right, they say. Why Don't We Just Kill the Kid in the Omelas Hole by Isabel J. Kim looks less at the choice we face than how we intellectualize suffering in society. When is suffering natural as opposed to unnatural, or acceptable or unacceptable? When does something become a tragedy, and how much good does suffering need to do before it becomes justified? And what about a nebulous degree of happiness, which is definitely there, but not really measurable? And with how we intellectualize suffering, at what point are we just sort of fooling ourselves into doing nothing about it in the first place, instead of getting up and walking away, or staying and fighting, or coming back to heal, or whatever else, or killing the Omelas hole kid? At the end of Kim's story, nobody really knows if there is a child in the Omelas hole at all, and Omelas, she writes, is just like everywhere else. Lucky until it isn't. Do any of these solutions work for you? No? Well, how about this? Imagine the child is rescued from that hole in the ground and taken aboard a spaceship. Yes, a spaceship, where they're told the Starfleet-esque Federation is going about rescuing all the children in all the holes all throughout the galaxy. This Federation has no war, no starvation, no animal suffering. It is a utopia by every means we would imagine. But the spaceship is attacked by another civilization who demands they hand over the child. They accuse the Federation of being as barbaric as those who would use the rooms, addicted to hierarchy and tribalism, killing innocent plants when they could subsist on artificial food. If you are civilized, they say, only barely. Much like the Federation rescued the child from the hole, this other civilization claims to be rescuing the child from a different hole of terribleness. The Odyssey Problem by Chris Willig betrays its central thesis in its title, the Odyssey. We like to imagine utopia as a binary choice between good and bad, between walking away and staying, between staying or fighting, between coming back to heal or leaving behind, as this horizon that we can run for and reach, and once we're there, we're good. But it's not. Everyone, on a personal level, on a societal level, is on a journey. We are on an odyssey. On an odyssey towards ethical perfection we may never reach, Wilrig points. After all, the Federation, who originally rescued the child, looks like a utopia to us, but they too are condemned by this even more advanced society. Wilrig argues that it's more important to be on the path towards utopia, on the path towards healing and fighting and making this place better, than it is to condemn other societies who might not be as good as us. Other people who are fighting, spending too much of their time just criticizing other people. These are the questions he plays with. Le Guin's story The Dispossessed offers a similar conclusion when we explore the post-revolution society of Anaras. Revolution, like utopia, she says, isn't something which happens once and then it's done. It is a journey, an odyssey. It has to keep happening, adapt and change and meet new challenges. It is a constant process of growing pains, and in that, utopia is never walking away. She seems very aware. Utopia is vigilance and self-reflection. Even Star Trek, by the way, took its shot at Omelas in the episode Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach, where a child supposedly takes on this burden of the whole willingly. This idea originally came from Dostoevsky, by the way, in Brothers Karamazov, where he asks that if our salvation in this universe requires Jesus to be tortured and killed, then has God created a dystopia? Cynthia Gomez argues in The Ones Who Come Back to Heal that if we're so concerned with building a better society, then maybe it's not about walking away or coming back or staying and fighting the wrongdoers, so much as it is trying to understand and lift up those who are suffering most at the bottom. The story is written from the perspective of one who walks away, but comes back to help the child heal, to rehabilitate them and bring them back into society, the one who suffers most. Jemison's piece focuses a lot on those who would undermine a perfect society, but Gomez's story says none of that matters unless we understand those suffering the most in the first place, what their life is about. All of these stories are in a fantastic conversation with each other. You almost can't understand one without understanding the others, and I love it. It is called intertextuality, connecting our stories to others and using those connections to deepen what our stories say. You know, even the titles of these stories are references to others. The Odyssey, or The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, or Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach has this layered biblical undertone, right? A plea to God. In this sense, there is no single Omelas. Stories are all about humanity communicating with itself, and Le Guin's conversation will always stick with me. I'm gonna keep thinking about it, but more importantly, I hope I do something about it. And yet, there is another interpretation of Omelas that none of these stories really tackle. If the story of Omelas sounds familiar to you, it's because, well, it is. Dystopian stories are commonly first presented as utopias, perfect societies without suffering or inequity or some other ailment, until the main characters discover their true darker underbelly, the reason the society can exist at all. Like in Minority Report, the crime rate is 0% until we see it's based on an unjust system of false imprisonment. Or The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, where the Eloi live in these perfect lives free of danger until you realize it's only because they're being prepped for slaughter. This is the utopian paradox, that we don't think a good society can exist without a dark underbelly. This narrative ploy seems almost ubiquitous in the dystopian genre. We go into these stories expecting it, trying to figure out what it is before it's revealed, and Le Guin asks, why? Once she describes her perfect society to us, she says this: do you believe? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. And then she tells us about the kid in the hole. N.K. Jemisin does a similar thing. Do you believe, friend? Do you accept the day of good birds, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. And then she tells us of the social workers who put the people corrupted with hate to death. And then when we see that a child who is also a little bit corrupted is instead allowed to survive and raised to see things differently and understand, she writes, what? What surprises you? Did you think this would end with the cold-eyed slaughter of a child? Underpinning all of these stories is a fundamental question. Why don't we believe in a utopia? Have we so readily accepted that suffering and cruelty and prejudice are so natural to humanity, so ingrained into us, so irremovable that we refuse to believe a city can just be a good place with good people? Are we so cynical to believe a society needs children suffering in some way, shape, or form to be good at all? That good only exists in the shadow of the bad? Are we so defeated as to believe that evil is somehow more realistic, more sophisticated, more complex than being good is? So much so that evil has this existential value, right? That joy can only exist with pain, prosperity with suffering, as if the terrible wonder of holding your firstborn child can only be known by being neglected yourself first. When Le Guin describes the ones who walk away going off somewhere that is even less imaginable to us than a city of happiness, she's not just asking whether we would walk away once we learn about the children's suffering underpinning our society. She's targeting our innate cynicism that we've perhaps grown too accustomed to, that prevents us from imagining a truly good society without a dark underbelly, without the child in the hole. That place they go is even less imaginable to us because we're willing to imagine a society that puts a kid in the hole to create a utopia, but we're not willing to imagine one where the people who walk away build something better. Because on its most fundamental level, it's that cynicism which is the most insidious thing in Omelas. It's that cynicism which leads us to justify the child being in the hole. It's that cynicism which leads us to justify other kinds of suffering that come after that as a fact of life, as necessary, and being necessary is just one step away from being a morally good thing. Le Guin's writing is full of people struggling to make a perfect society. They often fail, they often fall back into old ways. I don't think it's fair to say Le Guin is naive to these issues. She isn't, you can see that in her stories. But she definitely believed we should be striving for a better society, even if she wasn't convinced what shape that society should take or the path towards it. When she writes she's not sure a place that these people walk away to even exists, maybe that's her showing a kind of doubt. The beauty of Le Guin's writing isn't just the gorgeous prose, but in how effortlessly she prompts us to think. After all, ultimately, the ones who walk away from Omelas aren't just taking responsibility. They're optimists. They reject the paradox. I have a really weird career. I am self-employed, I've been doing this for 7 years, and I know that there are a lot of other people who want to be doing this sort of stuff that I am so fortunate to do. And people often ask me, how am I gonna get into it? And easily, the number one most important thing that I've had to do is teaching myself new skills. All sorts of things. I've had to learn Photoshop and Premiere and editing and production. Just recently, I've had to start using Notion to organize people and work and my ADHD brain, which goes out of control way too easily. And one of the ways that I've been learning how to do that is with Skillshare. And if you are creative, there are classes for everything, for writing and literature and art and learning how to video edit so you can make videos like this too, animation, and yes, and learning some business skills will help too. I know, not as interesting, but you've got to learn those as well. But fundamentally, you know what you want to learn way better than me, and that's why I think it's awesome that Skillshare is giving a free month to the first 500 people who use my link down in the description below. So you can decide what you want to learn. What's most important is that you try this stuff out for yourself, that you actually encourage yourself, give yourself time to learn, right? You've got to take those steps if you're going to create stuff. Skillshare has brought out these things called learning paths, which are designed to help master a specific skill, which is really hard when you don't know what you don't even know. I still have to spend time looking up how do I do this thing, right? But I can't even describe it. These sort of courses are to help you learn the fundamentals and beyond that to really master it. I would absolutely recommend doing the Photoshop learning path. That's really valuable. Making thumbnails, for me, that's what I got to do. You got to use Photoshop. I am all about online education. That is what I do. I'm about making it readily available and cheaper and easier, and I'm really glad because I think Skillshare is a part of that. You can do it all with amazing professionals. So number one, go and find a class that you want to learn something about with my link down in the description below. And two, tell me what you thought the ones who walk away from Omelas was really about. What struck you? Which version of this story did you like the most? There are so many that I couldn't even touch on, which is crazy. I really wish I could, but it was just going to be like 20 of them. But yeah, stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.